Before it was a symbol of romance, before it was the background of a billion photographs, it was a star of the silent screen. In 1897, the Lumiere brothers, the fathers of cinema, pointed their cameras at it. They saw what we see, a marvel, but they were the minority. Because long before the world fell in love with the silhouette of Paris, the city itself hated it. This is not just a story about a tower. This is a story about a monster that became a shepherd. This is the still globe. Welcome to the Eiffel Tower.
To understand the soul of this place, you have to go back to 1887. The foundations are just being dug, and Paris is angry. The greatest artists of the 19th century, writers, painters, architects, gathered to write a letter, a manifesto of hatred called the Protestation des Artistes. They didn't mince words. They called it a gigantic black smokestack, a hateful column of bolted sheet metal, a barbarous mass that would humiliate the Gothic beauty of Notre Dame and the Louvre. One writer, Guy de Maupassant, hated it so much that even after it was built, he would eat lunch every single day at the restaurant inside the tower. When people asked him why he dined in a place he despised, he said, "It is the only place in Paris where I cannot see it." That is the paradox of the Iron Lady. She is inescapable. She is the only thing in Paris that sees everything, and the only thing that everyone in Paris sees.
But look closer, past the silhouette, into the skin. This isn't steel. Modern skyscrapers are made of steel, sleek, crystalline, perfect. This is puddled iron. It's a material from a different age. Pig iron, melted down and stirred, literally puddled, by human hands in a reverberatory furnace to burn off the carbon. It is fibrous. It has grain, like wood. 7,300 tons of it, 18,038 individual parts. And holding it all together, 2.5 million rivets. Every single one of those rivets tells a story of force. They weren't just hammered in, they were heated until they were red hot. 4 men worked on a single rivet, one to heat, one to hold, one to shape, one to hammer. And here is the genius. As the rivet cooled, it shrank. That thermal contraction grabbed the 2 plates of iron and pulled them together with a grip that has not loosened since 1889. The tower isn't just built, it is clenched, held together by the memory of fire.
It feels impossible that something so heavy could sit so lightly on the earth. 10,100 tons in total. If you stand at the base, looking at those massive masonry blocks, you imagine the earth groaning under the weight. But the engineering is so precise, the weight distribution so perfect, that the pressure exerted on the ground is only 4 kilograms per square centimeter. Think about that. That is roughly the same pressure as a man sitting in a chair. The Iron Lady doesn't crush Paris. She sits upon it.
And she moves. Deep in the belly of the structure, beneath the feet of the tourists, the heart of the machine is still beating. The elevators. In 1889, moving people 300 meters into the sky was science fiction. You couldn't use a straight vertical shaft because the legs are curved. So Gustave Eiffel used hydraulics, massive water accumulators, giant yellow wheels that look like they belong in a steampunk fantasy, pistons moving underground, pulling cables that run over pulleys, multiplying the motion so that a short push from the earth sends a cabin soaring into the clouds. It is 19th century brute force, maintained by oil and sweat, still carrying us up today.
But the elevators almost stopped forever. The tower had a permit for 20 years. It was scheduled for demolition in 1909. The artists were ready to celebrate. The useless monster was finally coming down. But Gustave Eiffel was not just an engineer. He was a genius of survival. He knew that beauty wouldn't save his creation. Only science could. He turned the tower into a laboratory. On the second floor, he built a drop test machine. He dropped shapes down a vertical cable to measure air resistance. He built a wind tunnel at the base. He proved that the air flowing around a stationary object behaves the same as an object moving through the air. He wrote the laws of aerodynamics that would help the Wright brothers and Louis Blériot take flight. The tower wasn't torn down because it became the grandmother of aviation.
And then she became a warrior. Eiffel installed a radio antenna at the very top. He made the tower the tallest transmitter in the world. When World War I broke out, that antenna saved Paris. 1914, the Battle of the Marne. The Germans are advancing. The city is on the brink. But the tower is listening. The French military intercepts unencrypted German radio messages. They hear the enemy's plans. They find a gap in the lines. They launch a counterattack. The tower also fought back. She used her massive transmitter to jam German signals, blasting noise across the airwaves, blinding the enemy commanders. 3 years later, in 1917, the tower's operators intercepted a coded message from Madrid to Berlin. It mentioned a spy, Operative H21. They cracked the code. H21 was Mata Hari. The tower caught the most famous spy in history.
Decades later, another war, 1940. The Nazis have taken Paris. Hitler arrives in the city. He wants the ultimate photo op, the swastika flying from the summit of the Eiffel Tower. But the tower resisted. On the eve of the occupation, French workers, some say resistance fighters, sabotaged the elevators. They didn't just break them, they cut the cables. If Hitler wanted to stand at the top of the world, he would have to walk 1,665 steps. He never did it. He stayed on the ground. German soldiers eventually climbed up to hang a flag, but it was so large it blew away in the wind and had to be replaced with a smaller one. It was a clear message. You can occupy the city, but you cannot conquer the Iron Lady. And in 1944, when Hitler ordered General von Choltitz to burn Paris to the ground, to leave the city as a field of ruins, the general looked at the city, looked at the tower, and refused. The tower stood, and the city stood with her.
Today, she wears a different uniform. She has been painted 19 times. She's been Venice red, ochre brown, yellow. Now she wears Eiffel Tower brown. But it's a trick. It's not one color. It's a gradient. Darkest at the bottom, lighter in the middle, lightest at the top. It's painted that way to counteract the atmospheric haze, so that when you look at her against the Parisian sky, she looks uniform. 60 tons of paint applied by hand, by 25 painters who aren't afraid of heights. And at night, she breathes fire. Those golden lights are sodium lamps. And the sparkle? That's the diamond flash. 20,000 xenon bulbs that fire randomly for 5 minutes every hour. It's a spectacle, a romance.
But strip away the lights. Strip away the tourists and the champagne. Stand at the base and touch the cold, puddled iron. You are touching the history of a city that fought to survive. You are touching the rivets that cooled and clenched 130 years ago. You are touching the antenna that jammed the Germans and caught the spies. The artist called it a monster. The lovers call it a dream. But in the end, it is simply a shepherd, an iron guardian that stands still while the world moves beneath it. And as long as she stands, Paris will never fall.